Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today, we're going to be taking another look at the Geissele 16-inch Super Duty upper receiver. But before we get into the video, I do, of course, need to thank the sponsor of the video and the channel, and that is, of course, Gun Deals. If you don't know, Gun Deals is a website that compiles some of the best deals within the industry. Whatever it is that you happen to be looking for, go ahead and check them out. They probably have a link to it for the best possible price. And on top of that, I make exclusive videos for them on their channel, and I actually already have a video on this upper receiver, kind of an earlier review of this upper receiver on their channel. So if that sort of thing interests you, go ahead and check them out. Once again, that is gun.deals for the website and gun deals for the YouTube channel. Now, if you want to help me out personally, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, as all that sort of stuff is free and it does help me out quite a bit. On top of that, go ahead and comment something about this Goldie boy right here in front of us. Now, also on top of that, there's Subscribe Star, which is basically a pro to a Patreon. For a couple bucks a month, you get entered in some giveaways and, of course, get some additional content as well. Now, the last thing I need to mention is that I should actually have Mark V's up for sale today on my website, FocusShootingLLC.com. So, if you want to go ahead and check them out, they're a 12.5, 5.56 upper receiver. Go ahead and check those out. Those will be listed on my website. Now, with all that out of the way, I have absolutely no relationship with Geissele whatsoever. They make some pretty good products, and I buy some of their products at dealer or distributor prices from a third party. So I, again, have no direct communication or relationship with Geissele whatsoever. But I do think that they make some very good accessories and some very, very overpriced stuff that is not worth the money. But today we are going to be talking about this 16-inch Super Duty upper receiver. I paid a dealer price or a distributor price of $1,000 flat for it, and on top of this I also bought a 10.3, which we will be reviewing in the future, and I paid a crazy price of $600 for the 10.3 Super Duty upper receiver, which is an amazing value. So we're going to go ahead and start out with some of the most important components, and then we'll kind of work our way through the rest of the build, and then after that we'll talk about performance and accuracy and stuff like that. So starting off with the barrel, we have, of course, a 16-inch cold hammer forged, chrome lined, 4150 chromoly vanadium steel barrel. Now, that's a lot of stuff going on. Chrome lining is basically the best process you can do to the bore of your barrel because it is incredibly hard. It's about twice as hard as the actual barrel steel itself, which means that you will get a much improved barrel life on top of better heat resistance, on top of better corrosion resistance, because chrome is incredibly hard to corrode. And that is not just chrome lining in the bore, it is also in the chamber as well. So in terms of an interior coating on a barrel, chrome lining is still probably the best, the top tier that you can do. Now, on top of that, the finishing process for the barrel itself is cold hammer forging. I'm no expert on what that actually is. However, I do know that that is the best way to work barrel steel and impart some extra strength and durability and some other good properties into the steel itself. So, what you have is a very, very hard barrel steel. 4150 is the toughest barrel steel on the market, on top of an excellent finishing process of cold hammer forge, on top of the best internal coatings of chrome lining, means that you have a very, very nice barrel. Now, it doesn't just stop there, so we have a 1-in-7 twist, which is very standard. It will stabilize basically anything from a 55 grain all the way up to whatever you can fit in a 5.56 magazine. Now, the gas system length that they went with on their 16-inch guns is a intermediate or a Geissele length. It is basically in between a mid-length and a rifle length. So you have about an extra inch or so to a mid-length gas system, which means that you have about the same dwell time as you would have on a 14.5 mid-length. On their 14.5 guns, they have a mid-length gas system, so basically the entire gas block and end of the barrel just shifts backwards about an inch, inch and a half, and so they have very, very similar dwell times and hopefully similar performance. Now, on top of that, the profile that they went with on the barrel is kind of their in-house middleweight profile. It's not a lightweight profile like a super lightweight pencil profile, but it is definitely lighter than a government. You have a lot of material removed from the front of the barrel, which is where you're going to feel that weight the most. Now, on a lower quality barrel, I would say that would actually be an issue because that's going to reduce your accuracy, but through the quality of the barrel and the manufacturing process, we'll get into how accurate this upper receiver actually is. So overall, the barrel profile, the gas system length, in theory, should be very, very conducive to a very soft, very precise upper receiver. However, the gas port size, Geissele's spec on the gas port size is a .080. Which is a perfectly fine gas port size. That is the same gas port size that I use on my Mark IIIs, which is again a 14.5 mid, which is the same as a 16-inch Geissele length, because again it has about the same dwell time. But I believe this one here might be out of spec because this upper receiver is very overgassed. A lot of the shooting footage that you will see, we are running the Geissele Super 42 spring in the back with an H3 buffer in freezing cold temperatures, and it's ejecting steel case at about 3:30, 4 o'clock, and brass ammunition like M193 at about 2 o'clock. And now that is again with an H3 buffer, with a Geissele Super 42 enhanced power spring, and of course in sub-freezing temperatures where ammunition tends to slow down just a little bit. So the barrel, I'm not sure, I have not pin gauged this barrel because I didn't want to take apart the gas block, which is pinned, which we'll talk about in just a second. So I have not actually checked what the gas port diameter is on this upper receiver. Currently, with an H3 and the Super 42 spring, it does shoot very, very soft. It's a little overgassed with brass ammunition, but with steel ammunition, it's very, very soft shooting. But if you're going to add a suppressor or something else to this gun, you're going to get a very, very overgassed gun. So from the factory, especially with carbine buffers, carbine springs, it's not a very pleasant gun to shoot. You'll get brass ammunition ejecting at about 1 o'clock. So this is a very, very overgassed barrel, though it is tameable with, again, very heavy buffers and very powerful springs. Now, since we already mentioned it, the Geissele gas block, it is a .750 gas block, so it is a standard size gas block, which is quite nice. It uses a double set screw design on the bottom on a dimpled barrel, and of course it also has a spiral roll pin because it is pinned through the barrel. Now, pinning is not necessarily a needed upgrade. However, it is one of those things that will just basically ensure that that gas block will never shift no matter what happens to this rifle, because that gas block and barrel are basically one continuous piece, especially after you put 2,000 or 3,000 rounds through it. Now, the muzzle device that they went with on this upper receiver is the Surefire Closed-Tine. Now, when I actually ordered this upper receiver, I actually ordered the 3-prong, but they sent me the one with the Closed-Tine, which is perfectly fine. As far as a suppressor mount goes, it would be a very, very good suppressor mount. However, if you're not mounting a suppressor on it, it is basically just an A2 flash hider and definitely not worth $130 that they try and charge for it. That is very, very overpriced. Again, if you're using it as a suppressor mount, it's a great suppressor mount. The Surefire suppressors are very, very good and they will mount up just fine to that. But as far as just a muzzle device goes, it's entirely mediocre and entirely overpriced. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the next most important component on basically any AR-15, and that is, of course, going to be the bolt carrier group. Now, this bolt carrier group is the reliability enhanced bolt carrier group that Geissele sells. So it does have some special stuff going on. So let's go ahead and talk about the bolt first. This has not been cleaned whatsoever, so it is very dirty. I've only cleaned it one time, and that was for the initial review for Gun Deal, so I can kind of show you guys the wear and tear on it. Now, on the bolt itself, they use what they call Carpenter 158 Plus material. Basically, through some metallurgical process, the material is stronger and more shear resistant, so they rate the life of the bolt up to 25,000 rounds. Most bolts are going to crap out somewhere around the 10 to 15,000 round mark, so you're getting nearly double the life, or at least the rated life, out of the bolt. Now, I have not put 25,000 rounds through this bolt carrier, so I cannot verify that. However, other people have, and they have performed very, very well for a lot of people. Now, on top of their enhanced bolt material, the only other geometrical difference on the bolt itself is they do have some chamfering on the rear lugs, which is nice. It's supposed to have a little bit softer or a little bit smoother lock and unlock, and also impart less pressure on the bolt lugs themselves. And they are holding up very, very well. Really, the only wear that you can see on this BCG after, again, about 2,500 rounds is on the very leading edges of the rails on where it fits inside of the upper receiver and on the rear of the bolt lugs. Now, on top of that, the bolt and bolt carrier group is completely coated in what they call their Nanoweapon coating, and the Nanoweapon coating is supposed to be just a much higher grade process. To the naked eye, it looks just like black nitride. However, it has held up much better than nitriding does. Now, one of the nice things about nitride is, though, even when the black nitride coating is removed, the nitriding process still imparts the nitride into the material itself. So even though the black coating is removed, you still have that extra lubricity, that extra corrosion resistance baked into that upper layer of material as well, because that nitride coating actually penetrates into the bare material. Now, the Nanoweapon coating itself is an exceptionally good coating. It has held up exceptionally well. One of the best coatings that I've ever seen on a bolt carrier group. The only one that would really come close to it or rival it or be equal to it that I have seen personally is that E2 Armory titanium nitride, that gold titanium nitride coating has held up exactly as well, basically perfect. The only wear on that bolt at about the same round count actually is, again, the back of the lugs, where it's going to take a lot of force locking and unlocking. And then, of course, on the very leading edges of the rails where it fits into the upper receiver. Now, on the carrier itself, it is a very standard profile, and again, to the naked eye, looks very similar. However, they have extended the front rail sections, which they say increases stability on the bolt like 30 or 40%. I can't personally verify that, though it does again have a very smooth feeling recoil impulse when you have a very heavy buffer and spring in the back. And of course, it's also held up extremely well. So there are some very simple geometrical differences going on. The machining work on the bolt itself is very nice. It is a full auto profile bolt. It is a standard weight. They have their own special cam pin where there is actually some wear on the cam pin as well. But overall, it's done very well. You do have true grade 8 fasteners. Nothing else really special about the bolt carrier group, other than it is a exceptionally high quality with very high quality coatings and a very high quality material for the bolt. So overall, they charge like $300 for these bolt carriers, though. I would be hesitant to say that it would be worth $300, but again, if you're just looking for top tier long-term performance, if you just want to have one rifle for the next 50,000 rounds, then this bolt carrier group might be a good option for you. So again, for the complete cost of what I paid for this rifle of about $1,000, it's not really that bad. And I do think that the bolt is a very high quality bolt, though again, we can argue whether or not it's worth the asking price, though again, it does a great job. Now, the charging handle on this upper receiver is actually the airborne charging handle. It is Geissele's in-house charging handle, kind of similar to the Raptor. Now, at first, I complained about this charging handle because it's very small and it doesn't really give you all that much extra leverage on it because it kind of has a negative angle. But this is the airborne version, which is supposed to be smaller, lighter, and a little bit less snaggy than like other larger charging handles with a more aggressive angle on them that gives you more leverage. So this one here is designed to be still a little bit enhanced, and it does have nice knurling on the face, and it also has a raised ridge in the back for deflecting some of that gas if you are using a suppressor. Now, on this upper receiver, I have not shot it suppressed whatsoever, and that is because I do actually intend to sell this upper receiver after this review. And they rock set and shim the muzzle device in place, which is a very high quality way to mount a muzzle device, especially if you're going to be mounting a suppressor, so I quite like that. However, that means that muzzle device is incredibly difficult to get off, and I didn't want to mess it up for the next guy who actually buys this upper receiver. So overall, the charging handle is nice, but again, I think it's one of those things that they try and charge like $130 for, and it's just not really worth that much money. It is a little bit nicer than your standard mil-spec charging handle. However, there are much nicer, much cheaper charging handles on the market. So that for me is a complete pass. Now, as far as the upper receiver goes, we do have a square mark for the forged upper receiver. It is a very standard 7075 T6 aluminum forged upper receiver, with the one major difference being that in the front of the upper receiver, you have a huge cutout for your locking tab on your handguard. Now, the Super Duties have these handguards that genuinely lock into your upper receiver with this huge anti-rotation tab, I guess you could call it, and that would take an immense amount of force to get this rail to shift left or right. Now there is the tiniest bit of play, maybe like half a degree both ways, so maybe like a total 1 degree rotation that you can do when it is locked into the upper receiver. But as far as like actually rotating on you goes, that would be basically physically impossible on this upper receiver. Now, other than that, on the upper receiver, it is T-marked on top if you care, if you're taking optics on and off all the time, which I actually am, but I don't really use those all that much. You do have your standard dust cover and your standard forward assist. I quite like that. I know some people don't like that, and it's kind of a thing to argue about online, but for me personally, it's nice to see, and it doesn't really take up any extra space or weight. Now, moving on to the rail. This is another thing that Geissele is very, very proud of, and they charge a lot of money for their rails. Now, I know there's some memes going around online about Geissele being bendy boys. I don't believe that was the Super Duty rails. I believe that was a different version of their rails. And I hate to break it to you, but people want the thinnest, lightest guns possible, and then they get upset when the rails bend. Extruded aluminum, especially long pieces of extruded aluminum, are not particularly strong, and so when you make them very, very thin, they are going to bend on you. So it's kind of a thing that consumers want the lightest rails possible, the thinnest rails possible, and then they're confused why they bend when they get dropped or bumped, and it's because extruded aluminum just isn't all that strong, especially in just a long, straight piece of metal, basically. Now, this rail is not really what I would consider a lightweight rail. It is the 15-inch rail version, which is quite nice. It matches up very nicely. If you were going to suppress, you still have plenty of room, but there's not a lot of exposed barrel, so overall I quite like it. It's not particularly thin, and it's not particularly lightweight. You actually have a decent amount of material for rigidity and thickness on this handguard, which I quite like. On top of that, your locking method is these two huge cross bolts and a solid piece of steel on the other side that really locks it down. On other rails that I've seen, normally it's just a much smaller cross bolt and then a single piece of steel and then a single piece of steel, not one large continuous chunk. That of course applies that pressure over a much larger surface area, which is great for lockup. On top of the huge anti-rotation tab, this handguard is incredibly strong and is something that I would have no problem attaching several $1,000s worth of laser aiming modules to the front end of. Now, one weird thing that they did on this handguard is that you have the QD cups for your sling mounts, which I do use. However, if they had just moved them down just a little bit, you could actually get more rotation on your QD swivels on your slings. But as it is, they actually just kind of sit and bump up against the rail. Not a big issue, but it is just makes them slightly less usable, slightly less comfortable than if they had allowed them to have just a little bit more rotation. Now, as you can probably tell, this is an M-LOK rail. I believe they maybe used to make it in a key mod version, although with the Super Duties, I'm pretty sure it's just been an M-LOK version. So you do have true 7-sided M-LOK all the way around, which means that you can mount as much stuff as your heart desires. With a 15-inch rail, you have an exceptional amount of rail space to do whatever it is that you need to do. On this one here, I am just running a BCM CAG foregrip and a Streamlight, the ProTac HLX, so it's 1,000 lumen, 22,000 candela overhead light, which is very, very easy with their tape switch, which is not very good, and I've already killed one of my tape switches, so I should probably look into upgrading to something else. But overall, that is all the basic components on the rifle itself or on the upper receiver. Overall, all of the components are extremely high quality. The machining is done very, very well. The part selection is very good. The barrel quality is exceptionally high. But the barrel is also overgassed. Now that could be a one-off, but again, for the average price of like $1,200 to $1,500 that somebody's gonna be paying for one of these, it's probably not the nicest thing to see one of them being a one-off and being out of spec again when you're spending that sort of money on an upper receiver. Now, for some people, this is a huge amount of money and a crazy investment, and I believe this is actually the most expensive AR-15 upper receiver that I've ever purchased. However, this is still not top tier in terms of price. You have CAC, LMT, Daniel Defense. A lot of their upper receivers are going to eclipse this in terms of price. price. And honestly, for $1,000, what I paid for it, I personally think that this is a good investment if you're looking for a ultimately reliable and long-term rifle. Now, it's not going to be anywhere near the peak of price to performance, like a true top value, high value upper receiver, but I think it does have some really good attributes and some really good part selections. Even though this one here is overgassed, I can mostly negate that with heavier buffers and heavier springs. Now, in terms of shooting performance, it has been 100% flawless. Again, I have only cleaned this gun once, and I'm not sure if I ever added any lubrication to it. It is a exceptionally reliable gun. Again, it is overgassed, but that overgassing probably did help it out a little bit when we were shooting it in sub-zero temperatures with ice and rain and all the other sort of stuff that I've done to this. Now, one bad thing about the barrel that I forgot to mention is that it is a black oxide coating, which is supposedly a little bit less corrosion resistant, or a lot less corrosion resistant than like black nitride. I'm not sure why they would do everything to the highest degree on the barrel and then kind of skimp out on the coating. However, personally, again, this rifle has been dunked in water, it has been fully submerged, and again, I haven't really cleaned it whatsoever. And it has not rusted or shown any sort of corrosion issues, though again, I've only had this upper receiver for about 6 months. So true long-term corrosion resistance I can't really talk about, but again, for the time that I've had it, it's been perfectly fine. So the gun has been perfectly reliable for about 2,500 rounds now. I've used it in a lot of different configurations. I've tested a lot of different stuff on it. I've taken this rifle out to 500 yards and it has performed perfectly at those distances. So we might as well talk about accuracy. Now, with this gun, I've done accuracy testing on it twice now. I did it in the initial review for gun deals, and then of course I redid accuracy testing for this video, and you're always going to see variations in accuracy. However, I will go ahead and start rolling in the footage with the different groups, and it is safe to say that this gun on any given day will produce MOA or sub-MOA groups with the right ammunition. I believe on just the day that I happened to be out with this one here, retesting the accuracy on it, with M855, I actually pulled up a sub-MOA group. It was 5 rounds touching at 50 yards, which is like 0.461, so it was a little bit under 1 MOA with just like Winchester white box M855 green tip ammunition. And then also with some PPU match, some 77 grain match ammunition from PPU, which generally shoots terrible, but again, on that given day, I happen to get an exceptional group with this upper receiver. And that on both times that I've done accuracy testing on this upper receiver, I have been able to get sub-MOA groupings. Again, I've taken it out to 500 yards, no issues whatsoever. You could easily take this out to 6, 7, 8, 900 yards, basically wherever it is that your skills top out at with 5.56, this rifle will absolutely handle that. So, the performance has been flawless. The one snafu with it would be that it is overgassed. So again, I've mostly fixed that issue. It's still a little bit overgassed with hot ammunition, but there is a little bit more that I could do to it. You know, people in the first video that I made, people were complaining that I said that it was overgassed, and they were saying, hey, all you need to do is spend an extra $100, $200, get the Volter A5 with the H5 buffer in there with a rifle spring, and then it's going to, you know, solve your overgassing issues. However, again, when you're buying an upper receiver that is touted as perfect out of the box, that sort of thing, I really don't think you need or you should have to go out and spend an extra $100 to $200 to get the upper receiver running as advertised. So that is the one snafu with it. However, with that out of the way, I do think that it is a phenomenal upper receiver. It is an excellent upper receiver. I would have no problem running this in competition. I have ran it in competitions. I would have no problem having it set up as my home defense gun. I have had this gun set up as my home defense gun. It is a very, very nice upper receiver that is exceptionally reliable. Is it the best upper receiver for everybody? No, probably not. Now, I am really excited to test out their 10.3, which I do have on order with them. So we will be getting into some of their other offerings as well. But the 16-inch Super Duty does get a seal of approval if you're into this sort of price range. Now, this really isn't that much above like a BCM or a Colt. And I think you are getting a better bolt carrier group and maybe a little bit better of a barrel. Actually, you probably a much better barrel than like the BCM barrels. But overall, I think that it is a very, very good upper receiver, a great upper receiver. In fact, Not necessarily worth the money to everybody though, and I think that kind of goes without saying. When you're in this price range, to some people it makes sense, to some people it doesn't. I've had people that really want me to crap all over these rifles and say that they're terrible, but the honest answer is that they're not terrible. They're in fact quite nice, which they should be when you're spending this kind of money on an upper receiver. If I was going to go with the best, highest value Geissele, I would actually get the one without the reliability enhanced BCG and without the muzzle device. That way there I could save, you know, about $400, and I could put on whatever muzzle device I wanted. And if I wanted to add in their incredibly nice BCG, I could do that, or I could throw in something just mil spec that's also gonna run perfectly fine for the next 10 to 15,000 rounds, but probably wouldn't have the true ultimate long-term durability of the Geissele. So overall, that's about it for the video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you guys for watching this far into the video. Let me know what you guys think of this rifle or any other nice rifles that I should check out in the comments down below. So with all that out of the way, thank you guys once again for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace off.